Sense weekend is here.
Drive home with Rob Rinder.
Live, loud, listen. Rinder Talk.
Don't get nicked listening to anything else.
Rob Rinder on Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, you're listening to Rob Rinder on Talk Radio, the home of common sense, and it's our weekly journey across the pond stateside with Prof JC, Professor John Christopher Buer, White House correspondent at Real Political News. Now, we've got a lot to get through, Prof JC. I'm going to start with your, being a bit of a harbinger of doom. President Biden saying we're on the brink of war. Should we be looking for a nuclear bunker? I don't think you're very optimistic, Prof JC, right?
Well, right before your show, I went out and took some very lovely breaths of air, and I was hoping that they wouldn't be my last.
Really,
but,
you're that worried?
We do have Valentine's Day coming up, and we do have the Super Bowl on Sunday.
That's true.
And we do have people who are trying their best to make sure that Putin doesn't come across with his troops and invade Ukraine, which would be a terrible thing for him to do and a terrible thing for the world to do. So we're hopeful. We're hopefully optimistic.
Well, from an American point of view, a lot of people don't really understand what's happening, but you are, of course, the global leader. Messaging and communication and open channels of diplomacy are ongoing. But, you know, applying your mind and all of your experience over decades working around the capital, what is your view, A, how the president has handled this, and how dangerous do you think the situation is?
Well, the president made a major statement or two last night on Lester Holt NBC, which was seen live. It'll be seen again, and it'll be seen during the Super Bowl, after the Super Bowl, where he said, wait a second, you know, as he always says, things like, this is no joke. If we have troops, if we send in troops to Ukraine to extract our American citizens and a Russian takes a shot at them, guess what? We're at war. This is not some little tin pot operation here. This is one of the world's biggest armies, and things could get quickly out of hand, Rob.
Now, one of the things that's very important is that there is a difference between diplomacy and appeasement. And at the moment, looking at what's happening there, it's very difficult to know what side is a diplomacy and what amounts to appeasement. You know, there's a difference between, for example, an Argentinian junta invading the Falklands Island. That's a very black and white issue, right? It's an aggressive dictatorship. You know what to do. You stand up to a bully. It's a bottom line. It's easy to resolve, right? There's no diplomatic conversation that's going to cure that problem. Here, the lines feel a little bit blurred, where it's not entirely clear what the end game is for Russia. They're claiming they don't want NATO on its doorstep, on its borders. But the reality is the West, NATO as a group, and the EU have no plans or ambitions whatsoever to invade sovereign Russian territory. So given that's the case and NATO's presence in the Ukraine doesn't pose in any way a violent or existential threat to Russia, what's the point of the build-up? What is Putin's end game? And what should we be saying?
Putin would like to see the return of the Soviet Union, and he would like to see himself as the supreme commander, as the Joseph Stalin, as the Tsar Nicholas II, all in one. And he would like to keep moving his troops across Ukraine, perhaps into Poland, into Hungary, and take over all of the Balkans and the Baltics and become the dominant figure, and the heck with all of us. Now, Joe Biden is saying, we're not going to let that happen. Boris is saying, we're not going to let that happen. I mean, we do have emissaries. We had Monsieur Macron went to Paris. Unfortunately, he came home empty-handed. We had your wonderful Liz Truss, your foreign secretary, meet with Darth Vader Lavrov, and he pretty much insulted her, and she came back to London. We're trying our best. But if you look at the map, Rob, and this is something the younger generation doesn't understand. Right. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Right. If you look at the map and you see where those the Russian troops are, they're in the Black Sea. They're in Belarus. They're on the border of Russia. They're ready to go. I don't understand his point, and he will suffer greatly in terms of losses and his oligarchs will suffer greatly.
Right.
They can give up their flats in
well,
Belgravia,
can I come back to that?
and go back home.
Let's just come back to that because, in the event that he does, and by he I mean Vladimir Putin does cross that border, it's not nowadays necessarily the only possible weapon isn't necessarily military force. There are other arsenals of, tools that are available to have influence against the Russian government, not least hitting it where it hurts in their bank accounts. Some people would argue that the entire state is a kleptocracy. It's a state that relies on people thieving from all of its national resources and so on and so forth. What sort of thing could the American government do that isn't just military?
Well, on Monday, the president met with the new Chancellor Scholz at the White House,
right.
And he made it very clear to Scholz, if we're talking about the Nord Stream pipeline 2, Nord Stream 2.
Right.
And he said, if Russia goes over the border into Ukraine, the Nord Stream 2 is basically kaput. And the chancellor came home and he understood that. Now, Germany has its own relationship with Russia. They need their oil and gas. Mm-hmm. France has their own relationship with Russia. The United Kingdom has their own, much more aligned to the United States. Mm-hmm. But there is no win for Vladimir Putin at all, and for the Russian people. Remember what happened in Afghanistan. They had to leave and they were disgraced. And basically that became the end of the great Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. Well, it may have done, but the difficulty here is to really understand what, as I say, the long-term mission is. Yours is a very clear view that Putin, it's simple as, wants a global presence for Russia, the likes of the political footprint of the USSR, and it's as simple as that. And all of the stuff, the guff about not wanting NATO on its back door is merely a pretext for that sort of expansionism. It's nonsense, in other words.
Ukraine is not his country. Right. Sorry. Soviet Union is over.
Well, you're not sadly doing the diplomacy on our behalf. Now, for something slightly different, it is the biggest sport event across the pond this weekend. It's the Super Bowls, LA Rams versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Believe it or not, NFL has got much bigger here, Gridiron, because they have a game here a couple of times a year. Who's going to win?
Well, I don't have a favorite in this particular Super Bowl.
Who's your team?
But I do know I'll be watching the commercials and I'll be watching the halftime hip hop festival, because the people who will be performing
Snoop
there
Dogg,
will be
right?
Yeah, Snoop Dogg and Eminem and Mary J. Blige and Dr. Dre, and people get their little tables of food, and it depends. What's fun is it depends what city is playing. If it's the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs, then you'd have ribs and gumbo. I mean, Cincinnati, I don't know, macaroni and cheese. It's not really a snack table event, but they are charging $6.5 million for a 30-second ad, Rob. So that'll keep people's attention.
Could we just pause it? $6.5 million for a 30-second ad? I mean, that's a big thing every year, isn't it? I mean, I like us to have a bit of the Isaiah Berlins to talk about what's going on culturally there, but the Super Bowl ads are a kind of national or institution, if you like. You know, the Budweiser ads and
taking advantage of that.
Hey.
It was back in 92, after the Super Bowl in 92, where Hillary and Bill went on.
Yeah.
And
what were they advertising
early on? And when she said, "I'm no little wife sitting home making cookies like Tammy Wynette,"
right?
I'm no stand by your man. Well, we saw about that, but you've got a captive audience on Super Bowl Sunday, Rob.
Okay. Well, but sort of, what do you know? The sort of people look forward to the ads as much as they do the game. I don't know what your team is.
Well, I played football. I wasn't a big linebacker kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was a quick, end. Right. But I always liked football. But I think once you get to the Super Bowl, then I think you've got like 32 teams, 16 on each side, fighting. Finally, they're down to it's like the World Cup and Premier League all wrapped into one. And there they are on Sunday, and it's a big deal. It's really a big deal. and it's fun to watch.
Now, talking of fun, Prof. JC, you know, one of the reasons I suspect you are a popular professor is because you like to use a variety of tools to teach your students. You pick across the scholastic buffet. One of the things you do, as I understand it, is, you know, suggest 3 movie recommendations, or we would call them films, that are going to educate and delight us from over the pond. What should we be watching this week to learn a little and perhaps to enjoy ourselves as well?
Well, a little bit of black humor as we get through this contentious weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest Failsafe, which is a brilliant film directed by Sidney Lumet with Henry Fonda and Walter Matthau. It's about an accidental sortie of American nuclear bombers heading towards the USSR.
Wow, it's called Failsafe. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that film.
Put it down.
I'm writing it down.
Recommend it.
Yeah.
I recommend in my podcast and everything else films. The next one is a brilliant John Frankenheimer film, 1962, called 7 Days in May. It's brilliant cast: Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, Frederick March, and the lovely Ava Gardner, who's never a sight for sore eyes, I must say. One of my favorite crushes from my old days. And
you're too young to remember Ava Gardner. What are you, 100? I mean, please.
I remember Rita Hayworth. Come on. I met Marilyn Monroe and Judy Garland. Anyway,
you can't just hit and run with having met Judy Garland. Give us your last one. I think I might pass out. Carry on. What's it? Yeah.
All right, here's the one, and it's yours. And it's the brilliant, always brilliant Peter Sellers in Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
Where he plays 3 unbelievable characters, and it has to do with, you know, how I stopped worrying and learned to love the bomb. And it's Stanley Kubrick at his best, and it's a British film, and it is absolutely devastating and wonderful, and it'll take your mind off the nuclear attacks.
Okay, let's just get the list right. Prof. JC, Failsafe, 7 Days in May, and Dr. Strangelove. That's our homework for next week when we'll be catching up with you again. Always clear. Sadly, you're not doing the diplomacy for the State Department. I have to say, I would love to be at a meeting with Prof. JC and Darth Vader Lavrov. That would be something to hear indeed. As ever, it's been a delight to speak to you, to the Prof. I'm Rob Rinder, and you're listening to Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.